Okay, well, we're going to talk about the DMAIC method. Has anybody ever heard of the Six Sigma DMAIC method before?
Yes.
And what if you had to describe the DMAIC method, what would you say it's used for? Performance improvement. Process improvement. All right, so it's a way of thinking, it's a framework for solving problems and improving processes. Do you think it could also be used as a way to communicate your project to others? All right, so one way to think about the DMAIC model then is it's an effective process improvement methodology. It's an excellent way of thinking because it's very logical. And then finally, it's an excellent tool for communicating to an audience or to a group on what you're trying to improve. All right, so it's all of that. All right, so the DMAIC model is composed of 5 steps. Now, has anybody ever heard of the word DMAIC?
Yes.
Okay, crazy word, right? Okay, it probably is an acronym for something, though, don't you think?
Yes.
All right, so what would the D stand for?
Define.
Define. Okay, so in the define step, what we're trying to do is identify why improving this process is so important. All right, so in the define step, we're trying to lay out the reason for improving this particular process. So in the define step, the purpose of the define step is to identify and select an important process for improvement and quantify that improvement need with data. All right, so quantify the improvement need. Okay, so a way to communicate to somebody that we need to improve something, you think it might be good to convince an audience with emotion, or do you think it might be more useful to use data?
Data.
Data. All right, so if we're talking about data, what might be a good tool we would want to show in the define step? A graph. Any particular kind of graph come to mind? A line graph, all right. Why would a line graph be useful? Okay, a line graph shows performance over time. So performance over time then demonstrates that maybe this isn't just a one-time bad performance level, maybe it's been persistent. And maybe it's something we should take a look at. Would it be a good idea to maybe show the target on the line graph?
Yes.
Okay, so what do we reveal when we show the actual performance and the target?
Yeah.
The gap. Okay, so line graph then shows performance and it will highlight the gap. A couple other things we might want to do in the define step is to identify the stakeholders and their needs. And then also, based on the performance of this chart, we could probably show how much pain or how much impact this process's performance has on its stakeholders. And that, another tool we would use here then would be the cost of poor quality to quantify in financial terms the impact on our stakeholders. All right, so now that we've proven that this is a big issue, we can move to the measure step. Now, in the measure step, what are we trying to accomplish here?
Define a problem.
Define the problem. Okay, so as you think about the measure step and identifying the significant problem, Is there any particular chart or graph or tool that comes to mind? Pareto. Excellent. So the Pareto chart then, its purpose in life is to demonstrate the most significant problem impacting this line graph. Now, sometimes when we want to create the Pareto chart, we have to collect some data. So there might be some other tools we could use that would lead us to the Pareto. What other tools come to mind? Okay, so the first thing we want to do if we want to understand the process that's producing this outcome, process flow chart. Okay, so flow chart would be the first tool we probably want to explore. Now that we've flowed the process out and we want to start identifying opportunities for improvement and potential waste, what would be a tool we might want to consider next?
8 wastes.
8 wastes. Okay, so that'll be one of the lean tools we pull away, we take from the toolbox, and we utilize the 8 wastes. Now that we've got the flow chart and the 8 wastes, we can start thinking about collecting data. So what tool might we want to use to go forth and collect our data? Spreadsheet. Back in the old days, we used to call them check sheets, but now we utilize Excel spreadsheets. So spreadsheet. And now that we've got the spreadsheet, we want to take a look at our graph, because that graph might be displayed with 2 kinds of data. Anybody remember what those 2 different kinds of data are? Okay, so one is measurable data, and the other would be countable data. If it's measurable data, so for example, a cycle time problem, time to, let's say, average time to bring on board a new hire, or even retention rate of employees. Those are time-related issues. If it's measurable data, what might be a chart I would use to analyze the data? Okay, so if it's measurable, I'm going to utilize a histogram. And the histogram is going to show us what this process is capable of doing in terms of time. Okay, so the histogram would be used if it's measurable. If it's countable data, like the number of defects or the number of absentees, if it's countable data, what chart would we be using to analyze the data? That would be the Pareto. Okay, so in the measure step, we're always going to finish with a Pareto. Sometimes we have to go through the histogram to get there, sometimes we don't. But we'll always do a flow chart, the 8 wastes, the spreadsheet, and then if it's measurable, we will use a histogram. If it's not measurable, we'll use the Pareto. But when we do use a histogram, we will use that data then to create a Pareto afterwards. So we always finish with the Pareto, and we identify the most significant problem. Then we'll set a target on it, and then we go to the next step, which is what? Analyze. In the analyze step, can you think of what a key objective might be in the analyze step? What word comes to mind? Root cause. Okay, so in the analyze step, we are looking for root causes. We begin by identifying potential causes, and we complete complete the step by verifying the root causes. What might be a tool that we would want to start this step off with? Okay, so the fishbone. Does the fishbone have any other names? Ishikawa. Cause and effect. Okay, if it's called Ishikawa, who do you think it was named after? Dr. Ishikawa. Got it. All right, so we'll do the fishbone. Once we've developed a fishbone, we might have 30 or 40 potential causes on it. Using our experience, we may do a little trial and error and say, now let's pick 3 or 4 of these based on our experience and explore them a little further. We're not sure that these are the right root causes or not, but we're going to start exploring potential causes. What tool might I use after we do the fishbone? The 5 whys. Okay. And we're going to ask ourselves why 5 times, and we're going to get down to an actionable cause. Once we've got some very likely causes identified, we need to think about verifying them. And what are a couple tools that come to mind for verifying root causes? Okay, one is the chi-square test. What's another tool we might consider to get to root causes? Scatter diagram. Okay, so there are many tools in the toolbox, but these 2 are very common and are used quite frequently. Okay. Now that we know what the verified root causes are, we can think about solutions, right? What would happen if we tried to create solutions based on a hunch that we discovered back in the define step? If it's a hunch and it can't substantiate it with data, we might be coming up with solutions for the wrong problems. Okay? And it's been done before, as you probably can remember, but not from any of my classes. Okay, so we go into the improve step. And the purpose of the improve step is to develop and implement practical and feasible countermeasures. So with these countermeasures now, we know what the root causes are, and therefore we need to develop a countermeasure to eliminate each root cause. And we're going to evaluate our countermeasures and effectiveness. Are they effective? Will they work? And feasible. When we talk about feasibility, what ideas, what concepts come to mind? Cost, resources, time. Okay, so are they effective and are they feasible? And we will rate them using a Likert scale to come up with what we think are effective and feasible countermeasures. Then we're going to do a barriers and needs analysis and identify what might be some impediments that would keep these countermeasures from being successfully implemented. We'll do a cost-benefit analysis on our project to make sure it's going to have a positive return on investment. And then finally, finalize our action plan so we can show when it's going to get implemented, who's accountable, and what are we going to do if we get off track. Okay, so we've got several important tools here, including the countermeasures matrix, the barriers and aids analysis, the cost-benefit analysis, and then finally our action plan. Okay, we go and we implement all this stuff. And we definitely need to demonstrate if it worked, right? So we move into the control step. And the control step is not that difficult, but it's a very exciting step because we get to show how effective we are in solving the problem. All right, so in the control step, we have three important tasks to accomplish. The first is we have to demonstrate the results that we've achieved. If you wanted to convince your organization's leaders that your project was successful, what might be a way to demonstrate effectiveness or success of your project? Okay, we might want to show before and after on our graphs. What graphs would we be thinking about using? Pareto, histogram, and line graph, right? So back in the measure step, we finished off with a Pareto, and that Pareto showed our most significant problem. So wouldn't it be kind of cool to show before and after on the Pareto? Because if the problem got smaller, that would lead somebody to believe that maybe if the problem got better, maybe that line graph's going to get better too. All right, so we'll do a before and after on the Pareto. Next, we'll do a before and after on the histogram. And in the histogram, you remember the before histogram I'll just kind of sketch one out here. And here's the average. So the before histogram showed some bars, right? And it showed the distribution of the time. If I showed an after histogram, what would be some desirable characteristics I'd want to see of the after histogram?
Variability, tighter.
Okay, I'd want to see a couple things. One is, I'd want to see that the bars actually got taller around the average, right? I'd also want to see that the average moved to the left or to the right, but the average cycle time got improved. And then finally, I'd want to show a change in the range of the bars too. Okay, so if we did an after histogram, it might look something like this. So here's the new average. So old average versus new average, we could see that the average actually shifted to the left because cycle time was reduced. The other thing we see is, here's the range before and after. And you can see that the histogram actually kind of got squished up, right? And as we squished it up, the bars got taller. So a good thing to see in the after histogram would be that the average cycle time got better and the range of the histogram was reduced. That means the process has less variation in it, and our customers are more likely to trust us and have confidence that we can deliver when we say we will. Okay, so we're going to show results before and after Pareto, before and after histogram, and then finally before and after on that line graph that we showed back in the define step. Because that's the one that your leaders are most in tune with and paying attention to. Once we've achieved great results, what else do we want to do to this process? Standardize it. Okay, what do we mean by standardization?
Being able to repeat.
Okay, we got great performance, we changed the process.
Change it to D.
So if we change the process, we have to lock those changes in place. So one way to do it would be to update the procedures
Right.
that we use when we manage that process. If we change the procedures, what do we need to do to the people that are using these procedures every day?
Retrain them.
We train them, and now that we've trained them, would it be a good idea to maybe monitor to make sure they're using the new procedures?
Yes.
Okay, so we monitor them. And then finally, if the solution worked here, what might we want to consider doing with the solution? Replicating it to other areas. So if your organization has 6 regions, and this project was focused, let's say, in the central region, it might be worthwhile to think about replicating it to all the other regions in the state. Okay, so standardization seems like an easy thing to do, but it's actually pretty complicated, because one thing you have to be concerned about when you try to replicate ideas to other areas is that you have to deal with the not invented here syndrome, right? Okay. All right, then finally, we've standardized it, we've replicated it. We might want to think about future plans, right? Remember, continuous improvement doesn't mean we only improve the process one time. We have to keep thinking about plan, do, check, act, and improving the process over and over and over. So where might I look for opportunities to improve?
The other bars in the plan.
Okay, we might want to go back to the Pareto chart we looked at earlier, the before and after, because on the after, we still have some leftover problems to deal with. So we would put those together into an action plan, recommend them to senior management, and say, here's where we think we ought to be focused in the future to continually improve this process. All right, so that's the DMAIC in a nutshell. Are there any questions about it? How many folks feel that the DMAIC model is a good way to solve a problem? And we also realize that it's not just another tool in the toolbox, is it? It's just not a tool alphabetically under D in our long list of tools. It's separate, it's a methodology, it's a way of thinking, and it provides a framework for which all the other analytical tools that we use in Lean Six Sigma, including histograms, line graphs, Paretos, bar charts, it provides a framework in which all these tools can be applied in an effective way.